It was a Saturday night in Denver, the kind that starts out full of easy smiles and ends with something quiet gnawing at the edge of your chest. Jeff and Alina had just moved into their new place. A sprawling craftsman-style house with exposed beams and a backyard fire pit that probably cost more than my first car. They were celebrating the kind of success you clink glasses over, and Haley and I were there to play the part of the happily married couple. We'd barely stepped through the door when Haley drifted away, pulled into conversations with old friends and new acquaintances. That wasn't unusual. She's always been more social than me. I'm the guy who stakes out a corner with a drink and waits for the night to come to me. And that's exactly where I was, near the fireplace, holding a warm beer and pretending to be fascinated by someone's renovation story. When I saw her, she was across the room, standing a little too close to a man I didn't recognize. Not one of Jeff's friends. He was taller than me, dark-haired, with one of those easy, practiced grins that men like him wear like cologne. Haley was laughing. Not polite laughter, but the kind where you lean forward without realizing, where your hand rests lightly on someone else's forearm. That was my first jolt of something. Not jealousy exactly, just discomfort. I watched her brush her hair behind her ear and say something that made him laugh. She looked animated in a way I hadn't seen in a while, glowing almost. That should have made me happy. But it didn't. Then it happened. Someone near her, maybe Alina's cousin, I couldn't tell, asked, loud enough to be heard over the music, "Where's that husband of yours hiding, Haley?" And Haley, still smiling, still with her hand on that man's arm, said something I'll never forget. "Oh, I'm free tonight." It was like someone cracked ice inside my chest. The room didn't spin. Nothing dramatic happened. I didn't drop my drink or storm across the floor. I just stood there, watching her smile at the stranger like she owed him something. She hadn't seen me yet. Not until a moment later, when her gaze swept the room and landed on me. Her smile faltered, just for a second. But I saw it, a flash of something not quite guilt but not nothing either. Like she'd been caught out in a moment she didn't expect to be witnessed. I made my way over slowly, trying not to look as rattled as I felt. By the time I reached her, the guy had wandered off to refill their drinks maybe, and Haley had that look on her face like nothing at all had happened. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Who was that?" She took a sip from her glass, not meeting my eyes. "Just someone Alina introduced me to. I think he lives near here. He seemed friendly." She gave me a pointed look. "So, I'm just saying," I said, careful not to let too much slip through. "You said you were free tonight." Haley let out a dry laugh and shook her head. "Oh my God, Nathan. It was a joke. Didn't really sound like one." "Well, maybe you should try trusting me instead of listening to every dumb party comment like it's some secret code." Her voice was sharp, but low enough that no one nearby could hear. She was always good at keeping appearances tidy. I didn't say anything else. We stayed for another hour, but it felt longer. I kept seeing her through a filter now, watching the way she tilted her head when talking to people, how her phone buzzed a few too many times in her purse, how she didn't touch my arm once that night. On the drive home, silence filled the car like fog. Finally, I broke it. "You seemed really into that guy back there." She didn't answer at first, just stared out the window. Then, "Nathan, are you seriously still on about this?" I gripped the wheel tighter. "You said you were free. That's not exactly the kind of thing most married people say." She turned to look at me. "It was harmless. God, do you want me to wear a leash every time we go out now?" "That's not fair," I said, trying to keep my voice from rising. Something about the way you looked at him. I don't know. It didn't feel right." She scoffed. "Maybe that's your insecurity talking. Just because I laugh at someone's joke doesn't mean I'm throwing myself at them." "I know that. But if the roles were reversed and I was touching some woman's arm and saying I was free, I think you'd have something to say about it." She didn't reply right away. Then she said, "You're reading way too much into a stupid moment." Maybe I was. That's what I told myself, anyway. But as we pulled into the driveway, I realized something. That little moment at the party, it cracked something. A question had opened up in my mind, and no matter how I tried to reason it away, it wouldn't go quiet. Later that night, after she fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling, listening to her steady breathing, wondering why that one word, free, felt like the beginning of something I wouldn't be able to stop. I didn't sleep that night. Haley lay beside me, turned slightly away like always, her breathing soft and steady. And I just stared at the ceiling, eyes wide open, the darkness full of thoughts I hadn't let myself think before. The word free echoed in my head again and again like it was trying to unlock something. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People say stupid things all the time, especially when they're trying to seem fun or flirty in a crowd. But the more I tried to dismiss it, the more it stuck. It wasn't just the word, it was the way she said it. The way her face changed when she saw me standing there. Like I'd walked in on something not meant for me. And that's when the other stuff started coming back. Things I'd noticed but never really noticed, you know? There was the yoga retreat last fall. The one she swore she needed for her mental clarity. It had come out of nowhere. Haley had never been a big yoga person. She liked to jog around the park or go to spin class, but suddenly she was into week-long spiritual escapes in Aspen? And she didn't want me to come, even as a tag-along. Said it was a personal journey. I hadn't pushed it. I thought maybe I was being a little controlling to question it. But that wasn't all. There were the phone calls. The ones she'd take on the back porch even in the dead of winter. I'd ask who it was and she'd wave me off. Work stuff, she'd say, or just Steph venting again. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Only now, in the quiet of our bedroom, those moments stacked up in my mind like a pile of receipts you suddenly realize don't add up. Then there was the canceled trip to Santa Fe. It was supposed to be a family thing, just us and our daughter, Maddie, for a long weekend. But 2 days before we were set to go, Haley told me she had a last-minute meeting out of state. She flew to Chicago. Said it was unavoidable. But when I asked if she wanted us to reschedule, she said no. You and Maddie go, she said. You need the break more than I do. She never posted anything from that trip. Not even a casual airport selfie. And that perfume she started wearing not long after, spicy, heavier than her usual fresh scent, it was something I'd never smelled before. When I asked her about it, she said she got it as a gift from a coworker. I didn't push. I didn't want to seem suspicious. God, I didn't want to become that guy, the one who checks his wife's phone, who asks too many questions, who treats a marriage like a police investigation. But now, lying awake, the puzzle pieces started snapping together with a sickening ease. Even little things became suspect. The new clothes she'd bought that weren't her style. The times she came home late and said she grabbed drinks with colleagues. The way her phone screen always faced down when it was on the table. How she'd stopped reaching for my hand during movies. How her goodnight kisses turned into pecks and then into silence. And her eyes. That was the biggest thing. The way she'd started looking past me at dinner like she was trying to be anywhere else. I sat up in bed at one point, feeling this surge of anger and helplessness all at once. It was like a light had flicked on and I couldn't unsee the mess anymore. All the things I chalked up to stress or a phase, they weren't random. They were part of a pattern. Was it him? The guy from the party? Had it been going on that long? I didn't have answers, but now I needed them. I wasn't even sure what I was hoping to find. Confirmation? Denial? Some weird relief? But what scared me most was how calm I felt in that moment. Not broken. Not enraged. Just cold. Like I was already mourning something that had died a long time ago and I was the last one to realize it. Eventually, around 4 a.m., I got up and walked down to the kitchen. I sat at the table in the dark with a mug of coffee I never touched and I just stared at the fridge. Family photos. Drawings Maddie had taped up. Grocery lists. All the pieces of an ordinary life. And yet something had shifted. Something I couldn't unshift. Haley came down around 7, hair a little messy, wearing the old oversized hoodie I loved on her. She smiled when she saw me, still sleepy, still pretending we were the same people we were yesterday. You're up early, she said, grabbing a glass of water. I didn't answer. I just watched her. Studied the ease in her shoulders, the way she didn't seem to carry any of the weight I'd been dragging around all night. You okay? She asked. You look like you didn't sleep. I shook my head. Just couldn't turn my brain off. She nodded, unfazed. Maybe you should try one of those apps. The ones that play waves or forest sounds. They help me. Right? Because she was sleeping just fine. That moment told me everything I needed to know. She was living in a different reality. One where nothing was wrong or where she could at least pretend nothing was. And me? I was just now waking up. I spent the rest of the day going through the motions. Took Maddie to her soccer game. Answered a few emails. Even helped our neighbor with a broken fence post. But all the while, something kept looping in my head. How long had I been blind? And why did it take one careless sentence at a party to finally open my eyes? 2 days later, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I found it. Not because I went looking for it, at least not in the traditional sense. I wasn't rifling through drawers or prying into her emails like some amateur detective. I was actually looking for a set of spare keys we kept in the kitchen. Maddie had misplaced hers again, and I thought maybe they'd gotten shoved into the junk drawer. I opened it, sifting through the mess of expired coupons, takeout menus, and loose batteries, and there it was, Haley's old tablet. I had almost forgotten we even still had it. She used to keep it for recipe browsing and Pinterest boards, but it had fallen out of rotation once she upgraded her phone. It was dusty, tucked under a pile of magazines. I picked it up without thinking, wiped off the screen, and hit the power button. To my surprise, it still had juice. The familiar lock screen lit up, a beach photo from a trip we took to Monterey 4 years ago. Back when things were simpler. No password. She'd never bothered with one on that device. I should have set it down. Should have gone back to looking for the keys. But my thumb hesitated over the screen, and the weight of the last few days made the decision for me. The tablet was still linked to her cloud account. Photos, messages, browser history, all synced. I clicked into the photo app first. Just to see. Just to confirm that I was still the one overthinking everything. But I wasn't. There were dozens of photos I'd never seen before. Some recent. Some not. One folder caught my eye immediately, Aspen Retreat. My stomach tightened. That was the yoga trip. The one she'd sworn was a girls-only weekend of silence and sunrise meditation. The first photo hit like a punch. Haley, in a cozy sweater, curled up on a cabin porch, smiling at the camera, taken by someone standing just a little too close. Next, her and that same man from the housewarming party, arms around each other, mugs in hand, leaning into each other like they belonged that way. I kept swiping. A video. I tapped it. The screen filled with a shaky clip of them walking through snowy woods, laughing, her voice soft and in asterisk mate. At one point, he stopped, turned the camera toward them, and kissed her on the cheek. She didn't pull away. She laughed. Called him baby. My throat tightened. My hands shook. I felt cold in a way I can't really describe, like someone had pulled the floor out from under me and left me suspended in free fall. This wasn't speculation anymore. It wasn't suspicion. It wasn't a misinterpreted glance at a party. It was real. It had a face. It had a name. I went back into the files, looking for more. There were *TS of reservations, hotels, dinners, weekend getaways. All cleverly tucked into her personal calendar. All during dates she'd told me she was working late or attending professional development conferences. One message buried in a chain of synced texts confirmed the name I'd been dreading, Thomas Warner. He was more than a fling. The texts were familiar, lived in. They had inside jokes. Nicknames. Talked about future plans. I saw one from 2 weeks ago, can't wait to wake up next to you again. Feels like home. Home. I had to put the tablet down. I couldn't breathe. I got up, walked to the sink, and splashed cold water on my face. The rain outside had picked up, tapping against the windows like static. Everything around me looked the same, but everything had changed. That's the part people never tell you about betrayal. It doesn't explode, it corrodes. It eats through the walls of your life, slow and silent, until suddenly you're standing in ruins. I went back to the tablet. Not to punish myself, but because I needed to see all of it. I needed the full truth. The lies, the manipulation, the effort it took to keep this secret life running in parallel to ours. There were text threads where she rehearsed excuses. Told Thomas if I say I'm at yoga again, he won't question it. Or, I'll tell him the firm's doing an overnight workshop. Every word cut deeper than the last. I sat there for hours combing through digital evidence of a life I hadn't known I was living in. I copied everything. Uploaded it to a secure drive. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but I needed a record. A map of how I got here. One thing became clear as I pieced it together: this wasn't an impulsive affair. It wasn't a mistake made in a moment of weakness. It was a sustained, deliberate betrayal. Haley had compartmentalized our marriage. Wrapped it up in a neat little box she could tuck away whenever Thomas came around. At one point, I found a draft email she never sent. It was addressed to Thomas. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like if we could stop hiding. I love Nathan, but I feel like I've outgrown the life we built. You make me feel like I can breathe again. Like I matter. I know what we're doing isn't fair. But I don't know how to stop. My hands trembled as I read it again and again. She loved me? She loved me and still chose this? Or was it just something she said to ease her own guilt? A narrative that let her believe she was a good person who made a bad decision instead of what she really was. Someone who broke a vow and hid it behind smiles and silence. By the time the garage door opened and Haley came home from work, I had already closed the tablet and tucked it back into the drawer. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed time. I needed a plan. Because now I wasn't just dealing with a broken heart. I was standing on the edge of something bigger. Something that could unravel not just our marriage, but everything connected to it. And there was one more detail that chilled me to the core. Thomas Warner wasn't just some stranger. He was a name I'd seen on business cards, in emails, in a proposal I'd spent months preparing for my real estate firm. Thomas Warner was one of the potential investors I'd been courting for a high-profile development deal. Which meant this wasn't just personal. It was professional. And it wasn't just my heart at risk anymore. It was everything I'd built. I didn't confront her right away. That's what surprised me most about myself. I didn't shout, or throw the tablet across the room, or pack a bag and slam the door. Instead, I sat with it, let it sink in. Maybe because some part of me needed to understand every inch of the betrayal before I reacted. Or maybe I just didn't want to give her the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. That night, Haley was her usual self. She kissed me on the cheek when she walked through the door, asked what I wanted for dinner, and told me about a presentation that had gone well. I nodded in all the right places, played my role. But underneath the calm exterior, I was pulling apart the framework of our life in my head. The first thing I did the next morning was call a lawyer. I told him I wasn't ready to file yet, but I needed to understand the process. I needed to know what would happen to our assets, our daughter, our home. I needed to know how to protect myself because if Haley had been lying for this long, there was no guarantee she wouldn't lie again, especially if things got ugly. Next, I pulled every financial record I could find. Bank statements, investment accounts, credit card bills. I went through them line by line, looking for overlaps. And sure enough, there they were, charges that lined up perfectly with the dates from her retreats and conferences. Dinners in cities she never told me she was visiting. Hotels that didn't match her travel receipts. She had a whole shadow economy operating behind my back. The worst part? She was careful. Too careful. Most people slip up in little ways. Text messages, forgotten receipts. But Haley had curated her second life with precision. The fact that I only found it because of an old, forgotten device told me everything I needed to know. She had planned this. She had gone out of her way to avoid detection. But then came the gut punch I wasn't ready for. I was in my office, reviewing a development proposal with my business partner Evan, when I saw the name Warner Holdings at the bottom of one of the prospect sheets. My heart stalled. I casually asked Evan to remind me of the investor pool for our upcoming mixed-use project downtown. Warner Holdings is one of the big fish, he said. Thomas Warner, Mid-Atlantic investor, private capital, came through a referral. Guess who? Haley. Said they met at some networking mixer she went to for your firm last year. I felt my pulse spike. Haley had introduced us. That's what she said when she forwarded his contact info to me months ago. Back when I was trying to raise capital for a new build in 5 Points. I thought it was a professional connection. A favor. Just her being supportive. Now I realized she had been seeing him then. Probably sleeping with him. And she'd funneled him directly into my business. The implications made my head swim. Was he using the affair to get insider access? Was she feeding him details from our pitches? Would our firm be compromised if I stayed on the project? I spent the next hour pacing the office. My phone buzzed with reminders, Slack messages, unanswered emails, but none of it mattered. The personal had bled into the professional, and now my reputation was at stake. So I made a decision. I called Evan and told him I was stepping back from the Warner proposal. I said I had a personal conflict that might affect the optics of the deal. He pushed back, of course. Said we'd been working on it for months. That pulling out now could cost us. I didn't argue. I just said we'll find another investor, because I wasn't going to let Thomas Warner buy his way into my business through my wife's betrayal. That night, I sat in my car outside the house for over an hour staring at the porch light. I could see Haley moving around in the kitchen, setting the table like it was any other Tuesday. Maddie was doing homework at the counter. It should have been a normal night, but it wasn't. Nothing would be normal again. I finally walked in and Haley smiled at me like nothing had happened. "Long day?" she asked, reaching for my coat. I let her take it. I even kissed her on the forehead. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't protecting her anymore. I was protecting myself from her. Over the next week, I made quiet changes. I opened a separate bank account, rerouted my paycheck, consulted a custody specialist to understand what shared parenting would look like, made sure our daughter's college fund was locked down. I moved some of my things into a guest unit above our garage, nothing dramatic, just enough space to breathe. And still, I said nothing. Because Haley didn't deserve the version of me that unraveled. She deserved the one who planned, who measured, who made his decisions without screaming. The final straw came during a brunch with Jeff and Alina, the same friends who'd hosted the party where all this began. We were halfway through mimosas when Alina turned to Haley and said, "By the way, how's Thomas doing? We haven't seen him around lately." My fork paused midair. Haley blinked. "Thomas who?" Alina looked confused. "Warner. Didn't you two connect at that real estate mixer? Jeff said he thought you'd introduced him to Nathan." "Oh, right," Haley said quickly. "Yeah, I guess. I haven't talked to him in a while." She laughed too lightly. I didn't say a word. Just kept chewing. Because now I knew she was willing to lie even when the truth was sitting 3 feet away. After brunch, she turned to me in the car and said, "You've been really quiet lately. Everything okay?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "I'm just tired." It wasn't a lie. Later that night, I booked an appointment with a therapist. Not a couples counselor. Just me. Because I needed someone neutral. Someone outside of this mess. Someone who could help me map out how to end a marriage without lighting everything on fire, especially with a child involved. Haley, for her part, remained clueless. Or maybe she just chose not to see it. She still kissed me goodnight. Still asked if I wanted to watch something together. Still made grocery lists with both our favorite snacks. But I was done pretending. I was done being the fool in the story she was writing. It wasn't until the silence got too loud that she finally noticed. For days, maybe weeks, Haley moved through the house like nothing had changed. But I had. I was quieter, more deliberate. I started leaving early, staying late at work, eating dinners in my office above the garage. I wasn't cruel. I still showed up for Maddie, still answered questions, still folded the occasional load of laundry when I had to, but emotionally, I was gone. And even Haley, wrapped in her version of reality, couldn't ignore that forever. She asked one night, in the middle of brushing her teeth, "Is everything okay with us?" I was standing in the doorway watching her. The foamy toothpaste, the casual tone, it was surreal. Like she was asking about the weather. I just said, "Define okay." She rinsed, turned to face me. "I don't know. You've been distant. You're not present." That almost made me laugh. Not present? I'd been too present for too long. Present while she was off building a secret life. Present while she smiled through lies and whispered to someone else. "I've had a lot on my mind," I said instead. She didn't push. She nodded as if that explained everything. Maybe she thought I was stressed about work. Maybe she was hoping I hadn't found out. Or maybe she had convinced herself it was all still salvageable, that whatever she'd done, I'd keep shouldering the burden of making it work. A few days later, she started leaving notes. Not dramatic confessions, just small things. On the fridge, "Hope today is a little lighter." On my desk, "I miss your laugh." It was like she was trying to rewind us one sticky note at a time. Then came the therapy suggestion. She left a card on my pillow, "Dr. Linda Markham, couples counseling," and a post-it, "Maybe we try? Just to talk." I didn't respond. Didn't make an appointment. I wasn't interested in cleaning up a mess she'd made behind my back and then pretended to invite me into. But that's when the letters started. Not emails. Not texts. Letters. Haley sat down, wrote out her feelings on paper, sealed them in envelopes, and left them on my desk like some kind of emotional currency. I read the first 2. After that, I stopped opening them. The first one started with, "I don't know when things began to unravel. I just know I started feeling trapped in a life I didn't recognize." She called it adrift. Like we were 2 boats that had slowly sailed away from each other. As if an affair was just a natural consequence of emotional distance. As if sleeping with another man was something that just happened when the breeze changed. She wrote about needing spiritual autonomy. About how motherhood had made her feel invisible. How she had lost her voice somewhere between carpool and committee meetings. She never mentioned Thomas by name. Not once. Not in any letter. She didn't admit to the affair. Didn't apologize. Not in the way that mattered. What she did do was explain, endlessly, as if justification could dull the sting. It was never about not loving you, she wrote. It was about finding myself. That line made me physically sick. Because what kind of person finds themselves by lying to the one who loves them most? The second letter was worse. She tried to paint it as personal evolution, compared her decisions to growing pains, said she had been reading about soul reclamation and narrative reframing. Every word felt like a therapy speak shield meant to keep her from having to say the real ones. I lied. I cheated. I betrayed you. She signed the bottom with, I still hope we can heal. I left the letter on the counter. The next morning it was gone. That weekend, she suggested a walk. Just us. Around City Park. It used to be our place. Back when we didn't need to fix anything. I agreed. I was curious what she'd say face to face, without paper or metaphors. We walked in near silence for the first few blocks. Birds chirped. Joggers passed. Couples held hands. And we walked like two strangers orbiting the same memory. Finally, she said, I know you felt the shift between us. And I know some of it's my fault. Some? I've been doing a lot of work, she continued. Seeing a therapist on my own. Journaling. Trying to understand what led me to disconnect. Disconnect. I stopped walking. Do you ever plan to say what you did out loud? I asked, voice calm. She blinked. What do you mean? You know what I mean. Her face tightened. Nathan, I know I hurt you. I know I haven't been as honest as I should have been. But dragging it all into the open right now, it won't help. You think hiding it will? I'm not hiding, she said. I'm trying to move forward. You're the one who won't engage. I stared at her, stunned. I'm not engaging because I already know the truth, I said. You just won't say it. Her eyes filled, and for a second, I saw the version of her I used to know. The woman who made snow angels with our daughter in the front yard. The woman who danced in the kitchen with a glass of wine on Fridays. But that version had made choices, too. I want to fix this, she whispered. You don't get to fix what you won't name, I replied. We finished the walk in silence. I didn't say goodbye. I just got in my car and drove home alone. The next few weeks were a quiet war. She kept trying to coax connection with softened gazes, with Maddie-centered conversations, with small attempts at normalcy. But I wasn't playing. I wasn't cruel. I didn't want Maddie to feel the ice between us. But I was done helping Haley avoid accountability. One night, after Maddie was asleep, Haley knocked on the door to the guest unit. I opened it, expecting another monologue. But this time, she was holding a photo album. One from our wedding. She handed it to me. I look at these and wonder how we got so far from that day, she said. I remember feeling like we were going to build something unshakable. I didn't take the album. You built something else, I said quietly. And now you want me to pretend it's the same. She stood there for a while, waiting for me to say more. When I didn't, she left. And I knew, finally, that she understood. I wasn't coming back to the version of us she wanted to resuscitate. I was walking towards something new without her. After that night, everything became logistics. I didn't make grand declarations. I didn't demand explanations anymore. I just moved. Quietly. Deliberately. I found a small apartment about 15 minutes from the house. A clean, minimal space with tall windows and not much else. It wasn't home, but it was mine. I didn't tell Haley until after I signed the lease. Just gave her the move-out date and asked her to work with me on a parenting schedule. To her credit, she didn't fight me. Not loudly, anyway. She suggested mediation, wanted to try therapy for Maddie's sake, but by then, I had stopped trying to salvage what she was pretending was still a marriage. I was focused on stability. For Maddie. For myself. We agreed to joint custody, alternating weeks. I kept my tone civil, professional even. I used words like fairness and routine because they meant more than feelings now. Maddie needed predictability. I wasn't going to let Haley's chaos affect our daughter's peace. At the same time, I began separating everything else: bank accounts, passwords, digital subscriptions, mailing addresses. I changed the beneficiaries on my insurance, revised my will. Haley noticed, of course. One night she asked, "Are you erasing me?" "No," I said. I'm building a life that doesn't rely on someone I can't trust. She didn't respond. I also formally withdrew from the Warner project. Evan wasn't thrilled, but he understood. I kept it professional. Said it was a conflict of interest I couldn't disclose. Meanwhile, I reached out to a former client with deep pockets and a clean record and got us back on track within a month. Thomas Warner's name quietly disappeared from our business circles. The strangest part? There was no dramatic explosion. No final shouting match. No public fallout. Just a quiet unraveling like a thread being pulled until the whole thing came loose. And then I was alone. But not broken. 6 months later, the world looked different. My apartment wasn't filled with memories, it was filled with space. Room to breathe, to think, to feel without fear. Maddie loved the weekends we spent together. We made pancakes on Saturdays, built Lego cities, went hiking through trails she used to complain about. I saw her laugh more. Sleep better. She never asked why we lived in 2 places. Not directly. But one night, as we watched a movie, she curled up next to me and said, "I like this version of you." I didn't ask what she meant. I just hugged her closer. Work took on new clarity. I threw myself into designs, staying late not out of avoidance but out of focus. My firm slowly recovered, even grew. I hired 2 new associates, brought on a partner I trusted. The projects we took on felt more meaningful, less about money, more about what could last. I started hosting dinners again. Just small ones. Friends who'd faded during the years I was lost in Haley's orbit started coming back. No one asked what happened. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. Sometimes I caught myself reaching for my phone, out of old habit, wanting to share something with Haley. A funny moment. A beautiful view. But then I'd stop. Not out of sadness. Out of awareness. That part of my life was closed. And in its place was something quieter, more honest. I wasn't chasing passion anymore. I wasn't chasing clarity. I had it.